The gospel of this morning is one that we are very familiar with. At least the miracle is something that we're very familiar with. We usually read it as the Sunday of blessing. Whenever there's a fifth Sunday in a month, we read this miracle. We also read in what we can possibly call the Sunday of Eucharist, in which, like today, it is drawn from the Gospel of St. John, John 6. Now, as you know, there's two miracles of feeding the multitudes. There is one miracle where he is feeding 4,000. Another in which, like today, the one we just read, where he's feeding 5,000 men, excluding the women and children. The first one is in Mark and Matthew. The second one, the one that we just read, is in all four Gospels. Now, when you look at what is happening in the miracle of feeding the 4,000 and the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000, we see that what Christ is doing is very similar in all of them except one gospel, and it is the gospel of this morning, the gospel of St. John. Here, there is a difference, and an important difference. Now, unfortunately, the exact translation that we use this morning is not the greatest one for this particular passage of the Gospel of St. John. We'll keep this between us. There is an aspect here that is important, because there is a small variant here that is introduced over time that really changes the meaning in not the right way. And it's no scandal. There's no big problem here. It comes out of a good thing. The mistake is out of a good thing. Memorizing the scriptures, knowing the scriptures. Right now, if I ask you to write down, if we pass out pens and paper and ask you to write down, copy down the Lord's Prayer, none of us, I'm hoping none of us, is going to need to look it up. We've memorized it. We know it by heart. And we're going to start copying it right away. Our Father, who art in heaven. Now, when you look at the nitty-gritty of it, the details, that's really the Lord's Prayer as it is in the Gospel of St. Matthew, the Gospel of St. Luke. There's a few small differences. And the differences are important. The differences are important. Because this miracle is in the different Gospels, and there's the account of the 4,000 and the 5,000, when this part is copied, oftentimes people in the Middle Ages, just because they knew it by heart, and oftentimes they would memorize, especially the Gospel of St. Matthew by heart, it was for them kind of like, well, I know this by heart. I can just copy it quickly from my memory and not really from the text. But when we look at all of the early manuscripts, when we look at the fathers and how the fathers read the gospel and miracle of this morning and how they commented on it, there is that little discrepancy that we'll come to that is really important. In general, we have to keep in mind that with the scriptures are concerned with two things. One of them is historical details. The other is theological truth, and the two are not in tension with one another. As we'll see, there is a blending of these in how this miracle is relayed. Now, I'm sorry to belabor the point and kind of not get to it right away, because this is one of those issues that we have to all be on the same page. Because as soon as I said there's a little bit of a difference, sometimes we get a little antsy and kind of a little uncomfortable. Mainly because in our world, we have kind of radical criticism, and they're looking for any discrepancies to say, aha, there's a mistake here. And with atheism, it's the same. And the context in the Church of Egypt with Islam and the idea that the Quran has never been changed, so on and so forth, they have to deal with their own sort of issues there. In the early church, it's never a problem. It's never a problem. We are looking at the Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels and St. John. The Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, they are synoptic in that they discuss the same thing, but they are seeing the same thing. They describe the same events. Now, seeing things from the same vantage point, but slightly different, is fundamental. With us biologically, the fact that we have two eyes allows us to function in many cases. Why doesn't God just give us one eye? Why the redundancy? Thank you, God, for the second one, but why the redundancy? Why it's those two eyes slightly apart, seeing things just a little bit from a different vantage point. That's what allows us to have depth perception. That's what allows us to judge distances. That's what allows us to play sports. It's fundamental, and we take it completely for granted for our lives. When the fathers read the scriptures, these little differences provide them with 3D vision of the plan of salvation. It provides them with the depth of their spiritual vision. The first major distinction we look between the synoptics and into the synoptics, I'll just reference St. Luke, because usually when we have a gospel, the Sunday of blessing, it's St. Luke. First major difference is the location. All the other accounts, they are in a deserted place, in a desolate place, in a place that is inhospitable. The disciples are worried that the people are going to become fatigued and fall on the way back homes. Here, as we read, it's a place with plenty of grass. This is a field. This is a field of grass. This is more akin to a garden than anything. The synoptics are presenting us with the historical reality of the matter. This is in this world. In this world, it is a desert. St. John, the Gospel of St. John, they're not being nourished in a place of desert. They're nurtured in a place of plenty, in a comfortable place, in a place of grass, where they're not sitting on hot sand, they're sitting on grass. St. John is presenting us with what this miracle really is about, that it's about what will happen in the future. That it's a glimpse into our future with Christ. Now, we have a long history with gardens. Remember, we got kicked out of one a while back. The whole story of salvation is basically getting us back into that garden. And it's open. It's open on the cross. Remember what Christ said to the thief, the good thief. Today you will be with me in paradise. Paradise literally means garden. He's telling him today you're going to be with me in the garden. That garden that you and all of your ancestors have been kicked out of. You are now readmitted again. St. John, in how he is providing us this miracle, he is giving us a vision into our future. A vision in which not only are we in a comfortable place, and if you remember the litany of the departed, by green meadows, green grasses, where he acts first. And we'll focus on that another time, but remember in the other accounts, it's the disciples coming to Christ telling him, hey, send them away. Here, Christ, knowing what he will do, as we just read in the passage, he's the one that starts. How do you think, Philip, how should we nurture these people? Knowing, as the scriptures say, knowing what he will do. Now, in the miracle of feeding the 4,000, and in the miracle of the feeding the 5,000, with the one exception of the Gospel of St. John, in all cases, it's a very similar thing. Christ blesses, Christ gives to the disciples give to the people who are sitting in an orderly fashion. And this is, again, what do we have in the world? In the world, initially, Christ gave to the apostles went out and preached and gave to the peoples. Every liturgy, and this miracle is tied very closely to the liturgy. Every liturgy, it's from the altar to the clergy to the faithful. But it's this kind of chain of transmission. This is where that small variant becomes very important. Because as read by our fathers and as traditionally read in the scriptures, in this miracle, in Gospel of St. John, it is he who distributes to the people. He doesn't give to the disciples. He is the one that goes around and gives to the people. The people that are sitting on grass, the people that are in paradise. In paradise, it is Christ that we interact with personally, directly. There's no intermediaries. There's no clergy. All clergy, all priesthood is simply a priesthood that is in place of Christ, or represents Christ, I should say. But when the high priest is there, the high priest that we read about in the Pauline epistle of this morning in Hebrews, when the high priest is present, there's no other priest. He is the one who will personally attend to each one of us. We are told, we are promised by St. John in his epistle, not the God, but, well, more explicit in his epistle, first epistle, that we will see him as he is, that our knowledge of him is going to be perfect and complete, and that even though right now we see as though in a mirror and dimly, that then we will understand him and see him perfectly. The gospel of this morning, St. John is presenting us not only the miracle of feeding the 5,000 and feeding the faithful in this world, in this inhospitable world where it is not only inhospitable to his followers, but it's inhospitable to him, it's inhospitable to his message. But he's assuring us that that is a symbol, it is an image of what is to come. And what is to come is not being in a place that is desolate, but a place of refreshment, a place in which we are seated on grass, being attended to, not by any stand-in, but by the Lord himself, who will come, and he himself attends to us. Oftentimes when we're thinking about God, and it's not an inaccurate depiction, it's accurate, but oftentimes we're thinking of God on his throne with just kind of coming and worshiping him. Here we see kind of an additional image of heaven, of what we will experience again in the future. That rather than being on his throne, that he is attending to each of us personally. Now we receive through intermediaries, then it'll be directly. And now we understand through mirrors and dimly. Keep in mind that mirrors here, this is back in the day, 2,000 years ago, Roman mirrors. Don't be thinking about mirrors today. Think about something like a really shiny brass object that looking at it's almost going to be like a funny mirror at a carnival or the like, where it's going to distort reality. You don't really see yourself as such. That's what St. Paul means by seeing in a mirror, that we're seeing inaccurately. Now, one of the things that all of the accounts have in common, all of them, is that in all of them we receive. The faithful receive. They do not take. For some reason, it's almost like a glitch in my mind. I keep on coming back to this point. But the early church, in word and in deed and in liturgy, is very, very clear on this point. Redundantly clear on this point. Everyone receives, whether the toddler, whether the newly baptized, whether the patriarch, whether the metropolitan, the bishop. Everyone receives, no one takes, because you take what belongs to you. You take what you have ownership over. But you receive what you do not merit, what you do not purchase, per se. And the church is very clear that whether it is the sacraments, whether the Eucharist, baptism, that this is out of God's grace. Not merit, not ownership. And sometimes our mind kind of plays a little bit of tricks with us and kind of makes us think, well, today I'm worthy. Today I can attend church. Today I can receive communion. I've been good this week. Or I've attended the gospel this morning. I've even sat through the deacon's long-winded sermon. How much more prepared can I be? I've already kind of put in my time. Surely I am worthy now. And I've fasted since midnight. What else could God demand of me? But again, we meet with the church issues that none of this truly makes us worthy of communion. Ultimately, it is His grace and His allowance that allows us to partake. But now that we understand kind of this mystery, some ways to understand this miracle, it's not understanding the version of St. Luke and how St. Luke presents it, a miracle in the middle of a desert, or a deserted place, I should say, versus a miracle that is to happen in the future. It's both. It's both. This is what I was mentioning about kind of this idea of depth of vision, of 3D vision. That by looking at the miracle in these accounts, we're able to perceive the historical, what Christ did, but also the theological truth, the truth of what our future will hold. But now that I kind of understand this mystery in part, and I can kind of see in 3D, in greater depth, this miracle, now what? What do I do with that? Well, if nothing else, our thanksgiving should be more sincere, understanding that He is nurturing us not only in this desert, but He will nurture us in the thereafter, and that none of that is merited by you in any way. It is His grace, it is His love for humanity and for us. And now that I've received, I must give. I have to give. I must reciprocate. If Christ has given me Himself, again, this miracle and the Eucharist are very intimately intertwined, then I too have to give Him what He values most in this world, which is each of us. It is ourselves. Not that we are inherently worthy, but because He purchased us with His blood. We are bought for a price, a high price, and that makes us worthy. That makes us valuable in His sight, and hence we have to offer ourselves back to Him. It's on a very, very basic level. Our attitude needs to be that of Paul, James, John, who called themselves the slaves of God. Now, sometimes the translation goes into servants. Doulos can be technically either, but doulos is also slave, that I am the slave of God. Slaves have no freedom, they have no rights, they have no wills. They simply exist for implementing the will of their master. Lord, I am yours. Do with my time, my energy, my money, myself, do what you want. Tell me what to do. If you don't know what to do, you got two great priests here you can ask. But there has to be that giving back. Those that receive must give. minimally, before we do say or do anything, say anything, go anywhere. We just simply have to ask, is this in conformity with the wishes of our Master? And like being people in a desert, in a deserted place, who are hungry, who are famished, who come and are given sustenance. They are given true food, true bread. We have to seek out and reach out to those who are also in this desert, who don't know that there is this food, who don't know that there is this nourishment. We have to be a beacon. We have to be a guide unto them, telling them, come, see, taste and see. Not only the Lord is good, but here there is true sustenance. There is true bread, not only in this deserted world, but in the world to come as well. And glory be to God for it.